Welcome, guys, to the season 11 of our masterclass series, AI for SEO content, with the amazing Jeff Cooper from Saltbox. This is step 2 in a 4-step journey of a keyword. Last week, we talked about how to identify keywords, leveraging AI tools. Today, we're going to talk about how do you take that keyword and build a content strategy out of it. It should be February 21st that's highlighted. The next 2 sessions are on Wednesday, March 6th and Wednesday, March 13th. March 6th is really about, okay, you have the keyword strategy that we're going to talk about today. How do you actually create content leveraging AI based off it? And we're going to really focus on text, but we'll gesture at video as well. And then the 4th session is then how do you know if it's working from an SEO perspective? This is a live course that we're building in real time, and so your participation is essential. There are 3 ways that you can support this. You can do it in the chat, in the Q&A, and by taking the polls. And speaking of polls, we have 1 poll that we're going to launch now. BizHack, as many of you guys know, works with business support organizations like Miami-Dade County to service their members with free or low-cost training. And so what we wanted to do is encourage you to share with us any business support organizations like chambers of commerce or trade or industry groups that you know or are a part of. And whether you'd be willing to make an introduction to me so we can do more of this work. What we've come to find is small businesses need our help. They can't afford it. They need training in marketing and AI. And so rather than having you pay for it, it's better to have an organization pay for it and let you participate for free. So that's the kind of purpose behind this poll, and thank you so much in advance for sharing with this. I love giving this stuff away, and as long as there's someone to pay for it, whether it's taxpayer funded or through a membership organization, it allows you to benefit from it without having to pay for it. But it is time consuming and expensive to build this stuff. So what we're looking for from you as part of this live experience is interact with us in the chat. Ask us questions in the Q&A. It's best to put questions in the Q&A. That's where Jeff and I will know to look for them. The chat is more for sharing resources or communicating with our prompts. Also answer the polls. Thank you to the 12 of you who've answered it so far. On Monday, everybody asks the same question. Are we going to get the slides? Or are we going to get a recording? You won't get the slides, but you will get a recap recording along with a kind of write-up of what we covered on Mondays. So on Monday, you'll get the video. We'll also post it on our YouTube. We'll also send you via email reminders for the other 2 sessions that we have coming up, plus future sessions that we're going to be doing later in the year. And then we're going to be building out an AI for SEO content course. This is kind of the core of it, and you'll get early access to that when it's ready in a few months from now. The Q&A, again, is where your questions go. The chat is where you can respond to live prompts. In addition to just interacting with us, because we're able to respond to your needs if you communicate with us during the session. And we can both give you answers in real time, but also we've changed the curriculum based on some of the feedback we got from you. Spread the word, tell your friends. This is a free service. It's done with a lot of love and a lot of care. Also, several of you have left us reviews, and we really appreciate that. Those reviews we share with our funder. Please include a comment about what you like about it, how you find it valuable. And then finally, just connect with us on LinkedIn and show up to future masterclasses. I want to acknowledge our funder for this, Miami-Dade County, the Office of the Mayor, Daniela Levine-Cava. And there are 3 different small business support organizations or initiatives, I should say, that are part of Miami-Dade County. First of all, the library, an incredible resource, Strive 305, which these masterclasses are part of, and then just the overall Future Ready initiative, which is really geared to make Miami-Dade County residents ready for the future, and AI is a big part of it. I also wanted to acknowledge our media partner, South Florida PBS, and all of the other community partners who have helped spread the word to their organizations to let them know about this free training opportunity. Thank you guys for that support. I wanted to just share quickly, Jeff, AI was in the news this week. It was regarding Gemini, which is Google's alternative to ChatGPT, and it had to do specifically with some of the haywire images that it was creating. They called it the woke AI. You want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was using the Gemini tool as this was happening, trying to produce images for this presentation today. And I was typing in, asking it to produce an image of a that represented a content strategy, looking for some kind of inspiration. And then Gemini told me it couldn't produce images. And I was going, what is going on? So then I talked to Gemini. I was like, wait, no, I know you can. Could you just produced one an hour ago for me? And it kept telling me it couldn't. I went over to Twitter and started looking at what's going on. And really what happened is Gemini suffered from a same challenge that a lot of these AI and language model tools have, which is they have biased training data. So particularly when it came to creating images of people, a lot of the stock photography that the images were trained on were predominantly geared around imagery of white people. And so Google, in an attempt to try to correct some of that bias that was in the language model, added some features to Gemini that strongly encouraged the AI to make sure to include diverse representation of people and communities in all of the images they produced, which, although that seems like a very reasonable approach to trying to correct some of the bias in the original training data, the unintended consequence is that the tool took that direction so specifically that it actually would not generate pictures of historically white figures in history, things like Nazis or even Abraham Lincoln. And that became not only something that created a lot of political backlash, certainly from the more conservative sector, but also was just a concerning engineering challenge where it just made it quite obvious how hard it is to correct in not good training data or biased training data, and how just challenging it is as we go over this next few years for companies to generate this technology, be on the cutting edge, but also try to make sure they're not having an accidental negative impact on the world. And so for me, I think it was less of a interesting political issue as much as a really hard and challenging engineering and ethics problem that I think we'll continue to see as these tools take leaps forward in terms of their technological capabilities. But then we as humans have to figure out, how do we make sure that these tools are ethical and reflective of the values we care about.
And I think it also highlights, at least for me, the risks inherent in this for Google that are different than the risks for ChatGPT and OpenAI, its maker. Google has everything to lose by attaching its name to this, whereas Microsoft has like 1 degree of separation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the brand risk is much lower. OpenAI is seen as a sexy new startup, and they're going to move fast and break things. Google is seen as the incumbent player, and the brand risk is so much larger. And at the same time that this happened, ChatGPT went haywire this past week and started putting out nonsensical responses, and they got way less blowback for it. So it's just really interesting. This is the second time now. There was the first time when they released Bard, they put out inaccurate information about the space telescope. And I believe it cost like $100 million in market cap one day to the next. Like, what it's done is it's made Google very cagey about releasing these models, because the brand risk now is like 2 times they've done it. Massive release, 2 times they've gotten burnt.
Yeah, and when you think about Google's core product, like why does Google have a monopoly on search? And the reason is because generally speaking, we look at Google as a trustworthy source of information. And so really the trust that consumers have in their ability to provide accurate information is at the core of their entire value proposition as a search engine. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how they manage this over the next few years, because to your point, they're up against players that are going to be willing to break things without as much PR blowback as someone like Google, but Google has to stay in the game. And so it'll be interesting to see how they handle some of these things. But for anybody who is using Gemini this week, my apologies. It can no longer generate images. They've temporarily removed that feature, and we'll probably see it reintroduced at some point.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So, whoops. Let me see. Let me try that again. Where did you go? Okay. All right. So without further ado, it's one of the things when you go full screen. All right, here we go. All right. Welcome to Unit 2 of AI for SEO content. Today, we're going to be talking about build a profitable content strategy. My name is Dan Gretsch. I'm the CEO and founder of BizHack Academy, and I'm here with Jeff Cooper, who's the CEO and founder of Saltbox, an agency that specializes in search marketing. So today we're going to really cover content strategy. How do you build a content strategy? First, you need to define your target audience. You need to do research into that audience. We're going to show you some great AI tools that you can leverage to do that. And then you need to figure out what your messaging is going to be. What are you going to tell this audience? How are you going to get them to react? This is all in the strategy phase. The actual execution of the content strategy is what we're going to cover in Unit 3. The big issue that a lot of people have is they kind of rush right to content creation, have ChatGPT write an article for us, and there's no strategy behind it. They don't know which keywords they're targeting, and they don't actually have kind of strong audience and messaging behind it. So that's really what the focus of today is to make sure you have the right strategy behind your SEO, or frankly, it's not going to work. And it's just a lot of wasted effort. And, work is work, whether it's AI assisted or not. So this course is for the business leader and the marketing expert. And you'll see, we were talking about how in this past week, Gemini, which created these images, tends to prefer non-white images, and it got them into lots of trouble. And you can see that the business leader is non-white, non-male. The point is that it can be really, really tricky to train these image generators. For whatever the reason, getting images wrong is far more vivid and more noteworthy. But Google has had a lot of problems with either inaccurate information when it comes to the telescope in the launch of Bard, or here in February of 2024, when we're recording this, when they launched Gemini, it was creating, for instance, images of Black folks in Nazi uniforms. So the desire for diverse outputs that don't reflect historical biases that the internet has built into it, which is what they're being trained on, can also cause political fodder and brand embarrassments. The learning objectives of the course is 3 things. One is we want to give you the context. How do these tools work? Who owns them? What are the financial stakes? We also want to give you the context on SEO. We want you to understand how search engine optimization works, how Google's algorithm works. None of this is breaking news, but all of this is essential to understand in order for you to make sense of how to use AI to build SEO content. Then we're going to talk to you about the skills. The skills are really, what are the things that a marketing expert needs to know in order to create content that's strategic? And finally, the tools is we're going to then show you tools that can accelerate that process. We are in Unit 2 of 4 units dedicated to the journey of a keyword. We started with how to discover your keywords. Today, we're going to now say, now you know your keywords, how do you build a strategy off of it? Then once you have that strategy, we're going to talk next unit about how to create engaging content based off that keyword and that strategy, and then figure out in Unit 4 if it's actually working, if it's accomplishing your goal of driving more qualified traffic, your ideal customer, to your website. So today we're going to be focusing on using AI to build a profitable content strategy, and we have 3 goals for today. Number 1 is we want to help you figure out, okay, you have a list of potential keywords. How do you pick from that list the ones that are going to be the most likely to actually lead to a sale, to drive your ideal customer to your website, and to have an intent behind it so that they're winnable. The other part about selection with keywords is some keywords are incredibly profitable. They show a high intention and desire to buy, but they're super expensive. And you're going up against incumbents who've been building SEO content for decades against those keywords. And to dislodge them off the first page of search results, it's not possible. So there's also, like, is the keyword winnable? Which is a huge factor that we're going to be talking about, because it's not just, is it profitable, but is it winnable? And can you win it at a reasonable time and money cost? Because time is money. When it comes to SEO, this is organic search results, but it still takes a lot of time to produce the content, and a lot of time for that content, even if it's perfectly designed and great strategy behind it, it doesn't get indexed right away. It doesn't show up in search results right away. As you're going to learn in the next couple sessions, there are a lot of other signals that Google uses to determine whether it's going to win ultimately. And winning in this case is getting in the first page of organic search results, because at this point, anything past page 1 is very unlikely to be seen by many people. Because of all this, you need to be very strategic. You know, there is a tendency, and I hate this tendency, for small businesses to just churn out AI-generated crap. And it feels good, and it's a waste of time and money, and it also makes the internet suck. So stop. Like, just stop. Like, don't do that. You know, there are all of these companies now that offer like an AI solution where you can automate content creation and just put out dozens, hundreds, even thousands of articles. And to me, you're doing a disservice to the internet and to your own business, because you're fooling yourself into thinking you're creating SEO strategic content, and the truth is you're not. Jeff, I'd love for you to weigh in on this point, because it is such a pet peeve of mine when, and so many, frankly, agencies like yours are purveyors of this sin, because it's easy to do.
It's easy to do, and it's cost effective. And certainly if you're an external agency selling services, then your incentives aren't really aligned than when you're a business owner and you want to really make sure these investments are paying off in the long run. And especially given the long time cycle that it takes even for a successful piece of content to work, it can be hard as a business owner to even know that this AI content won't work. And I think one of the things that I do want to be clear about is AI content in and of itself is not problematic. It's not that Google hates AI generated content inherently, but the real challenge with what you see a lot of these businesses or companies doing at scale is click a button, produce content, publish it on your website, do this at a large volume. The real challenge with that is usually the content is fairly mediocre. And it's not because the language models aren't good at stringing words together and saying something that sounds intelligent about a topic. But if you also think about how these language models were trained, they were trained on all of the existing relevant content on the internet that you're using these tools to write about. And so as a marketer, what tends to happen is when you scale up AI content production, you end up with what was this Sierra that just said it was boring? Or I can't read the name, but yes, freaking boring AI content that essentially doesn't have any extra oomph to it. It's not reflecting your expertise, your experiences. It's not demonstrating your authority. At best, it's sort of a derivative piece of content that's very similar to what already is written about this topic. And so the challenge is not that AI is necessarily the enemy, but as we'll go really deep into in Unit 3 of this course, to get AI to write a good piece of content, you need to do a lot of work and interactions with those tools, very similarly to how you would do if you weren't using AI tools in the process.
And another way to say this is many people skip to Unit 3, creating content without doing the keyword strategy or the content strategy, and they will fail. And they will waste a lot of our time and force us to read generic stuff, and they won't meet their business objectives. And so we just, Unit 1 and Unit 2 are around doing the right foundational work so that these aren't random acts of marketing. And the key here is human-centric content creation. Your audience is a human being that you want to do business with. It is your sales prospect. It is a stranger who had never heard of you before. And the bots, whether it's AI generating the content or Google's search algorithm surfacing the content, those bots are intermediaries. And if you rely too heavily on them, it won't work because human beings won't react well to it. But more interestingly, as we're going to start teaching you today and next session, Google uses human beings to manually rank your content. And that is as important, if not more important, a part of the measure of what gets surfaced as what the algorithm initially determines. And I'll be very honest with you, until I started working on this process with Jeff, I did not know that. And so it's not just from a brand marketer's perspective that this content needs to be good. A lot of the signals that Google uses to determine high quality content, and this isn't, I think, broadly known, it wasn't known to me, is actually based on thousands of human beings looking at and evaluating the content according to a published rubric that we're going to share with you. So you do not have to guess at what they're measuring. I'm Dan, he's Jeff, and we're going to take it away, baby. All right, so I'm going to launch another poll. Oops, forgive me. Let me stop sharing. Let me end the other poll. I've never quite figured out how to silence that. Excuse me for that. So I'm going to launch another poll about your usage of AI, and then we're going to go over that usage. So stand by. All right. So every time we meet with you, we're going to be asking you the same 8 questions, and we're going to be measuring your use of AI for SEO. And I wanted to share with you the baseline of where you all started when we did this poll for the first time last week, and highlight a couple things, and then we'll get into the meat of it. So let me just share my screen. All right, so the poll should be up and the screen should be shared. All right. So these are the results of the poll that we did on AI and you. And the idea here was, first of all, how much are you using AI tools generally for your business? And then to what extent do you have an SEO strategy, and are you using AI in support of it? Which is like really the learning objective of this whole course. So one of the things that's extremely exciting to me is more than 90% of you, 92% of you are using AI either for personal or business or both. And that is exactly what we want. We're very proud of you, and keep at it. Almost 80% of you are using it in your business. But to me, this is the most powerful tool in a generation for small business efficiency. I can't imagine you trying to run your business without it at this stage. And frankly, it's going from being like a competitive advantage to table stakes. You know, the companies that don't do this are not going to survive. It's a little bit like hop on the train or have it run you over. So how often are you using it? You know, in full disclosure, I'm in that 6 to 10 range. You know, Jeff on his CEO work is probably in a similar place, but in his SEO work, you know, they're probably using it thousands of times and often in an automated way. What's interesting to me is nearly a quarter of you are using it 10 plus times a week. The closer you are to the doing of the work in the business, the more likely you are to use it. The more that you're a marketing doer, the more likely you are to use it. But really high levels of usage this is definitely a group that over indexes on usage. And the interesting thing to me is saved money or time. Most of you are not yet seeing really big returns on your time. It's mostly just saving you time. I will remind you that time is money as you're answering this. And so do answer if you're saving significant amounts of time or saving on resources you might have otherwise needed to hire, you are saving a lot of money. If it's allowing you to do the same work in half the time, take your hourly rate and calculate how much money you're saving. Now, A quarter of you have a keyword strategy. This is the foundation of any SEO work you're going to do. Jeff, I think you were surprised at that, right?
Yeah, I was really actually happy to see that because I think that's a piece that a lot of business owners miss going into SEOs. It's an
Yeah.
awesome baseline.
So I hope that the number inches up because we've given you incredible tools to build a keyword strategy. Now it's just a matter of doing the work. Are you publishing content in support of that strategy? More than half answered no, but that does mean that more than 40% answered yes. Is that also a kind of surprise?
Yeah, it is a surprise. And it probably also means that there is some portion of you that are making content in support of SEO without a keyword strategy.
Exactly, right. Because only a quarter of you have a strategy on keywords, and yet 40% of you are producing content off of it. Not a you, not a good idea. It's not going to have any results. This is the definition of a random act of marketing. Just create content, throw it up there, and then pray. It's the spaghetti on the wall approach to marketing, and it is a waste of time. You do sometimes get lucky, and like one of those pieces will hit, but there's nothing systematic about it. It's a little bit like creating content on social media and hoping it goes viral. Have you used AI tools in support of those initiatives? 1/3 yes, 2/3 no. At the end of this, this should be 100% yes, because AI is so powerful as an SEO content tool. All right, so let's get to it. You have your keyword strategy. Now you need to create a content strategy. And I wanted to start with a foundational marketing framework. And this is the way to avoid what we call random acts of marketing, which is spaghetti against the wall, creating content without a strategy, hoping it works. Really, it's a wing and a prayer. This is called the lead building system. It's something we trademarked. It's the signature methodology that BizHack uses for small business lead generation. And at its foundation is your business story, sometimes known as your brand story. And in BizHack's approach, it has two elements. It has your founder's story. So as the CEO, as the founder of the company, why did you build this company? What is your personal motivation for doing this? Those of you who know me and have been to these have heard me talk about inspiration I've drawn from my two grandparents for doing this. One who was a coach in the soccer league, the other who was a teacher at a public high school. The other part of your brand story is really related to your core purpose. Why do you do what you do? And how does it make the world a better place? Right? So for BizHack, we train small business we train small businesses because you are the heart and soul of Main Street. You're the heart and soul of the economy. You represent 50% of the economic activity and 80% of the employment. And what a sad world it would be if every mainstream, much as I like it, were just Subways and Chipotles and McDonald's, right? Like so much of what we love about our communities are provided by small businesses. And I love being in support of that because if you don't market yourselves effectively, you're not going to survive. So that's like the business story, right? And it's not really the subject of today's session, but it's the foundation of your marketing and frankly your business. Then now you want to get yourself noisy and introduce yourself to the world and convert strangers to sales. You've done everything you could to get all of your friends and family to buy from you, to get their referrals to buy from you, and it's taken you so far, but now you have to sell to strangers. How do you do that? First, you set a campaign objective. What are you trying to do? And the campaign objective has two elements to it. One is what business objective are you trying to achieve? And then how are you going to measure whether your marketing campaign is in support of that objective? So for instance, all of us want more sales. Great. So your campaign objective is you want to drive $100,000 in more sales. Well, there's a customer journey, which we'll talk about, that gets them from stranger to sale. How do you know if this step in the journey is going to work, and what metric can you use? So for instance, if you're creating a video, did they watch the video? Did they share the video? Did they engage with your social media content? What's your website traffic? All of these are indicators that your marketing is working. So that's campaign objective. That's really where your business goals are defined and the metrics that you're going to use to measure success are indicated. Then target audience and irresistible offer. This is the foundation of marketing strategy. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about target audience. It's relatively well understood. Most small businesses are pretty good at understanding who their ideal customer is. And by the way, you always want to market to your ideal customer rather than whoever your current customer is. Why? Marketing takes a lot of time and effort. And why spend time and effort on trying to attract anything but your ideal customer? I'm not saying that you have to turn away business from non-ideal customers, but you don't want to target your outreach to them. So always think about ideal customer and then irresistible offer. In the, in the case of marketing broadly, that's like, what is your discount you're offering or your free gift? If you sell brownies, your irresistible offer is a free taste of the brownie, right? If you sell education like me, giving away free webinars is an irresistible offer. And usually you give it away in exchange for someone's contact information. In the context of SEO content, the irresistible offer is baked in, and it's thought leadership. It's smart educational content, right? The value you're providing is your knowledge. So we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the irresistible offer because it's baked into SEO content. Now, once you've figured out who's your audience and what you're giving them that's of value, then you need to make it come alive. And there's two aspects to that: thumb-stopping visuals and compelling messaging. Thumb-stopping visuals can include video, it can include imagery. AI is super helpful with this. This is usually the thing that most small businesses struggle the most with. And if I had to point to one revolution that's underway that is going to be incredibly transformative, it's in the creation of thumb-stopping visuals at scale, at a much lower cost, without you having to hire a videographer or a graphic designer, and then the messaging, the copywriting to accompany it. AI is so good at that. We're going to talk a little bit about that in Unit 3, but that's a huge world unto itself. Why thumb stopping? Because it needs to be mobile optimized. Most people are going to engage with your content, even if you're a B2B company, a business-to-business company, on your mobile phone. So we need to make sure it's mobile optimized. Thumb stopping, meaning that if you're scrolling, you stop because that video, the first 2 seconds of it, caught your attention. And then finally, customer journey. Customer journey and campaign objective tie together. The campaign objective is, what do you want to get out of this single marketing touch point? So if you're creating a video, it's to have them read the video, watch the video. If you're creating a piece of SEO content, it's to get it ranked by Google and to drive traffic to your website and to have the SERP, or the search engine ranking, be high on page 1, right? Those are objectives. But what happens when they go to the page? The ultimate objective is to get them to fill out a form and to ask for a call or to read some other content. And that journey from that single piece of content to a journey from stranger to sale is called the customer journey. And that loops back in to pillar 1. You've defined the objective for that single piece of content. Now, what's happening next on the next stage in the journey? So I'm going to hand it over to Jeff. But the 3 that we're going to really focus on when building the strategy, and really broadly for this course, is pillars 1, 2, and 5.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, and I would also reiterate too that I think what we're looking at here, like a lead building system like what BizHack offers, is a very essential foundational framework for your company, really regardless of what type of marketing you're doing. Even if you're not investing heavily in marketing, having this stuff understood and documented well for your company can be a very beneficial thing to keeping all of your resources aligned on the story you're trying to tell and the journey you're trying to facilitate for your customers. When it comes to search engine optimization specifically, when we're trying to win these organic ranks in Google, we tend to zoom in, like Dan mentioned, on a few of these elements where we become much more concerned about, at a tactical level, what are the goals for our SEO investments? What are the types of metrics we need to invest in those? And Dan, you can run to the next slide. We also want to make sure we understand the target audience we're speaking to, as well as the messaging for that audience. When it comes to these first two things, goals and metrics, we'll spend a little bit of time today giving you some feedback on how to think about goals specifically in the context of SEO. On the metrics portion, Unit 4 is going to be very important. And based on some of the survey responses we've got, it sounds like metrics is a big area where we as a team can really dig in and get our heads around what is important relative to the life cycle of this content, how to know what's working, what's not working, and more importantly, what to do about it when you see certain metrics in that life cycle. And in Unit 4, we're going to be digging very deep into that area. What's also interesting about SEO, and we'll touch on this a little bit more throughout this lesson, is when we think about relevant messaging and target audiences, there are a few different ways to go about approaching how you think about that in an SEO context. We're going to spend a little bit of time first talking about these things at a high level to support all of your marketing strategy, concepts like audience personas, which we'll get into that are going to be important for us to have visibility into. But what's also so interesting about search is we have a ton of behavioral data. We know what people are searching for. We know that our content is trying to help give the user who's searching for those things either answers to their questions or the information that they're looking for. And so as we talk about this and work through this together, you'll see that in the SEO realm, when we think about target audience and relevant messaging, that our keyword strategy is really such an important behavioral signal that can sometimes trump the traditional things you would care about if you were running a Super Bowl ad and you really needed to nail your target persona since you didn't have any information about them. In search, we have this behavioral data, which allows us to tune those messaging much more specific to the context of what the user is doing in that current moment. Um, so first, we'll talk a little bit about goals and metrics here. So one distinction here, just to make sure is very clear, is when we talk about goals, we really want to be focused on what successful business outcomes are. And the distinction here with metrics being metrics are the objective measures of success that allows us to track progress on these business goals. So like I mentioned, in session 4, we'll go very deep in metrics. We're going to give you all the tools you need to understand how to know what's working, know how to adjust your strategy based on that data, and optimize these investments over time. What I did want to spend some time on this group with, especially since we have such a range of different levels of investment going on right now, is what are reasonable goals for an SEO strategy. I think there's I'll give you a few different forms of what we've seen and how we as a business set goals alongside of our partner clients throughout the process, but they're a little bit different depending on where you are in the stage of your maturity. If you have never invested in SEO, you've not produced any content, you haven't been driving any traffic to your website, and you are just getting your toes dipped into this big ocean of SEO, I would strongly recommend setting a goal that may sound very not a very big reach goal, but something very basic along going from having nothing to getting a little bit of visibility. So for instance, when I'm working with a client that has never before seen any traffic from SEO, usually our first goal is to just drive 100 visits from Google search or something very simple that allows us to go from having done nothing to at least starting the process of getting into these exercises and driving some results from those investments. So if you've never done this before at all, I would suggest starting with a very basic goal. And it's from an expectation standpoint, you want to make sure that goal is time bound, which we'll talk about in this next slide, but the expectation should be that give yourself 6 months from whenever you start to reach that first initial milestone of a little bit of traffic from SEO. Like Dan mentioned, there's a long process between publishing a piece of content and how Google picks it up and ranks it. And so if you're just getting started, keep it basic. Focus on some initial traffic acquisition. If you've got a more mature program, so for instance, companies that we work with that are driving 50,000 users a month from organic search, that's when you would go into a more mature set of goals. So for companies at that stage, you really want to have your goals oriented to sales that you can get from that traffic, as well as things like consistent year over year growth of your existing traffic. Usually we aim for 15 to 30% for a healthy website. So depending on where your business is right now, don't set a crazy, unrealistic goal for yourself. If you've never done this before, keep it basic and focused on proving the concept that you can produce content and generate some traffic. If you have done this before, be more aggressive about goals, specifically around sales, a certain target query that you want to rank for, or sustained growth over time.
I love this. Before we move on, I can promise you, I'm a business owner. Every business owner is the same. We want to drive sales using SEO. Otherwise, what's the point? So I'm going to give you a very common scenario. I am a business owner of, let's call it a $2 million a year company. And I want to drive sales using SEO. I want to get more people to visit my website and some percentage of them to convert into customers. What is a reasonable, like, what are some of the supporting metrics or the sub goals or the leading indicators, if you want to call it, that will tell me I'm on a good path to achieving that? What would be a reasonable budget for this hypothetical company to spend per month? And how long approximately will it take for me to actually start to see sales in this scenario?
Yeah. So those are all great questions. And in unit 4, we'll spend a lot of time mapping out the life cycle of a content and customer journey and can get in more detail. But today I'll speak to it at least high level. So usually what I look for in that scenario, you're a business owner, you're spending, you've got 2 million in revenue. What are your expectations? Ultimately, sales is what we're trying to drive. What I suggest doing is walking back from the sale throughout the stages of your customer journey to identify what I like to call leading signals or leading metrics of future success. So, in the case of SEO, when you publish a piece of content, the first thing that you have to care about is that Google finds the content and puts it into its search engine somewhere, even if it's page 100 of Google, that it's indexed your content. And so some of the first things we look for metrics of success are what quantity of the content I'm producing is being indexed by Google. And that's it's not going to drive sales, but that's an initial positive signal in that journey. Then we start to look for performance metrics related to how that content is performing in a search engine. So we'll take a look at some leading signals like how high up in the search engine does that content rank? It might rank position 20, which is a positive outcome compared to where you were, but you're not going to see sales from it. And then when we get more mature, we want to look at things like impressions, how many times we're showing up in the searches, clicks that we're getting directly on the result in search, and then eventually want to track things like form submissions or engagement with certain content on the website. And all of those metrics help paint a picture from not showing up in Google at all to starting to show up, driving visibility, driving traffic, getting engagement on content, which is ultimately going to be the behavior that drives sales. So as a business owner, I think that there's a stack of metrics we can use here to get a little more clarity on how things are working, even though our sales goal may be lagging. And from an investment standpoint, what I think most people should be prepared for, and some of this depends on how many resources you have internally that can help do these things like keyword research or produce content. But a lot of businesses that scale that are trying to make a non-trivial effort on SEO are usually investing anywhere between $1,500 to $5,000 a month on content production and technical optimization and keyword strategy and those types of things. It can be more cost efficient if your team is trained on how to do this and it's part of your regular process. But if you're outsourcing, you're probably looking at $50,000 a year of investments in those type of activities.
And I can aver that a $5,000 a month for SEO is a very common price point. Let's just say in this scenario, you're spending $5,000 a month and you have an amazing firm who's doing all the right things, quote unquote. What is a rough timeline for you to start seeing the number one leading indicator would be form fills. If you're starting to see leads coming in from your website, you know something good is happening.
Yeah.
So strangers filling out a form to have a call with you. What would be, or to sign up for a webinar that you're promoting or sign up for your newsletter, any of those are equally valuable. So how long roughly at a $5,000 a month hard start, starting from scratch, might you start to see some form fills?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will predicate this with the fact that it can be very different depending on how competitive an industry is, how authoritative a website is when we start working on something, how good the content is from our competitors, since we aren't the only ones that control what's going into Google's algorithm. So there are absolutely exceptions to what I'm about to say. I've seen companies that can drive results very quickly, like in a matter of weeks. I've seen companies that have taken 2 to 3 years to drive any kind of measurable results from these investments. I think as a baseline, if I'm thinking about it as a business owner making an investment, what I would recommend that you give at least 6 months before you expect to see not sales signals, but traffic being generated and people engaging on your content. And then probably about 12 months before you're really starting to see the value you've built translate into consistent inbound leads for your company. So I really like to think of SEO as a growth initiative, that and a growth investment I'm making for my company. Whereas if I'm desperate to drive leads tomorrow, that's when personally I tend to use things like paid search or social advertising, where I have that immediate response. But then the downside is I'm stuck paying for clicks for the rest of my year when I do those strategies. So usually what I recommend is, if you can get this SEO stuff right, it can make it a lot less expensive for you as a business owner to invest in online advertising, but sometimes you want to do both at the same time. So personally, with my small businesses that I'm involved in, we'll often use advertising for 6 to 12 months to help generate the form fills and the sales while we're building up SEO content. So after a year, we can start to pull back on those advertising investments and get more of that traffic for free.
Such an important conversation. Just really to the business owner out there, like really just moderating your expectations. Couple quick thoughts before we move on, and thanks for letting me dive deep on this one. Number one, there are three, broadly speaking, sets of activities that any business are doing. Things are going to pay off immediately, things are going to pay off eventually, and then things you just do because you want to. And it's really good to just be very clear that SEO content is definitely in bucket two, things that'll pay off eventually. Now, the challenge is it takes 6 months to see signals and a year to see ROI in a best case scenario with a great partner. And the challenge is so many small businesses don't have great partners doing this. And so it can be really challenging in that 6 month to 1 year to know if you're on the right track. And that's what we're going to talk about in Unit 4. So let's talk about SMART goals, and specifically how to set out the business objectives so that you're actually able to measure it effectively.
Yeah, that's great. So this is a framework that is not my own, I think, and I don't even know who created this framework. It's so universal that I think if you've probably been in any business strategy education session, you might have come across it in the past. But well, we like to apply the same level of diligence around our SEO goal setting, which is just to make sure when we're thinking about those business objectives that we are doing a few things with our goals. We want to make sure they're specific, that it's not ambiguous exactly what we're trying to talk about. So we don't just want to rank for more keywords, but what rank do we want to achieve on what keywords, or what traffic levels do we want to get to? It needs to be measurable. We can't just say something like we want to improve brand awareness, because there's no really objective way to know how we're doing against that. We want to make sure it's attainable and realistic. This is where being very measured with your keyword strategy is important. We don't want to assume we're not going to outrank like the US government for IRS related queries on the search results. So they need to be in the realm of something that's actually feasible for you to accomplish. You want them to be relevant to your business. I know this sometimes is a surprising one to people, but I have seen some scenarios where business owners don't really quite fully think through some of the implications to users of some of their objectives. For instance, we worked with a company that wanted to rank #1 for their competitor's business term, which certainly is something you can do in paid search. I think we even had a student in our group last week who had a scenario where a competitor bid it on their name on paid search. But for organic search, it's not relevant. It doesn't make any sense for Google to show a user who's looking for your competitor your company, because it's confusing to the user. When they get there, they're going to get to your website and you're not the company they're looking for. And that's not really a great experience. So make sure these goals are relevant. Ranking for products, services you sell, content that's relevant to your prospects, those all make total sense. Just don't be unrealistic about what's relevant to a user when they're using the search engine. And then the last piece is time bound. We want to make sure that you've got a finish line here, or else you're going to be having the same goals forever. And it's okay if you don't hit your goals, but by making them time bound, you create a operating atmosphere where you can make sure that people are staying on top of it and moving the ball in the right direction. And so
Yeah.
from, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I wanted to just, Chris Lean is bringing up a question about branded versus unbranded search. And
Mhm.
it's a really common question because most of us are going up against better heeled competitors who often are bidding on our name.
Yep.
And even if you're trademarked, it can be tough to defend against that. And so, like, job one when it comes to SEO and even paid advertising is to protect your brand.
Mhm.
Can you just speak briefly, because I know it's a question a lot of us have about how to protect your brand from a search marketing perspective, both paid and organic?
Yeah, of course. So I'll start with organic strategies because those are the ones you can do without cost to play defense. So there's a concept that some SEOs refer to as entity stacking, which is a little bit of a bastardized form of this concept, but the first thing you can do from an SEO perspective to protect your brand is claim every possible relevant social media or public directory listing available to your business. Are you in the Chamber of Commerce? Make sure you have a landing page set up with the chamber. Most chambers have some directory where you can put some information about your company. If you're not, make sure you have your Google Business profile set up your Yelp listing, set up your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your TikTok, your Instagram, and make sure all of those properties reflect your brand name, reflect your website, and link back to your website. So that's a stage one of defense. That allows you to send a signal to Google that, hey, we've got this website, but we also own all these other media properties, and it reinforces Google's perception that that is your brand. The second strategy is related to your content. Make sure your brand name is actually reflected in the content of your website. This is a thing that most people would assume is the case. But when you actually look at the text content of a website, it's sometimes easy to not ever say your company name because you might have a logo on the page and you're focused more on the services and products you offer. And so you might not have that basic content on your website. So making sure your homepage reflects your business name, but also using a concept which we'll touch on a little bit next week. There's a concept from Google called structured data, or you might be hearing it called schema. There's some code you can also put on your website that tells the search engine robots a little information about your company, your website, your social media profiles. So, from an organic perspective, make sure to do all those things. If you can do those things, you will at least prevent someone from ranking improperly through the organic results for your brand name. What becomes a little more challenging is the advertising side. So Google's policy is that they allow advertisers to bid on trademarked brand names. So you can't prevent your competitor from telling Google, I want to show up when someone queries for your business name. What you can prevent your competitors from doing is using your brand name in their ad copy. And so the two things that we pay attention to when playing defense on your brand integrity on the paid side is one, you could run your own ads for your brand name if you've got competitors that are outranking you through the paid results on your own brand name. That will introduce some cost for you as a business, but it will cost them a lot more to run those ads. Those clicks will be more expensive for them than it will be for you. And we won't, that's out of scope in terms of our lessons today, but what you should know is that if you're not the company that is trying to show up for that keyword on the paid search side, you will get charged a premium by Google to play the clicks. So one way to play defense is just to advertise against them for your own brand name. It's not ideal, but the other way to play defense is Google Ads will actually allow you to submit trademark infringement complaints if their robots doesn't catch it, and they are usually pretty good at taking down those violations.
Perfect. I just shared the poll results. We're going to go to the next section now. But we're seeing 98% use AI. Really exciting results. Let's just look at keyword strategy. Okay, so 60% from 20 up from
All
25.
right. A lot of people did their homework.
It's working, man. It is working. All right. So let's get going.
And I'll probably adjust one other question that I think some people were mentioning in the chat. When you think about the cash flow implications of this is we're in this lesson really focused on how to do SEO well, just from one business owner to another. What I usually do is I use the advertising to create sales to enable the cash flow to invest in SEO. So it still requires some investment on my part on the front end, particularly in media costs for advertising, but sometimes those channels can play together to afford that investment.
I don't want to derail the lesson. So you tell me, Jeff, if we want to talk about this now or do it as like a little AMA at the end. But Laura was like, you should be in a pay per performance relationship with your SEO firm. And my answer is never. It'll never happen. So it's like a fantasy of many business owners. Is that going to derail us too much? And do you want to maybe cut back at the end on that?
Let's go into it. I think it's an important topic.
Do you have enough time to do what
Yeah,
you need?
I think so.
All right.
And we'll keep it short.
So let me start. I'm like, this one I love.
Yeah,
right?
Dan's ready to. Yeah, Laura got under Dan's skin.
I'm so frustrated with business owners who do this because, and this is with all due respect, Laura, but business owners who don't understand marketing and how risky and uncertain an activity is, insist when they have very small businesses that the marketing firm, take on all the risk and get upside on the theoretical sales that you're going to drive, and there's no proven record of this company being able to drive such sales. And then they get really frustrated with marketing firms that hedge and say, yes, maybe this has worked in the past. And the analogy I like to use is, and forgive me, but baseball. The greatest baseball players in the history of the game got a hit 4 out of every 10 times they step up to the plate. And if you as a marketer have a 400 batting average, you are one of the best marketers in the world. There's this famous quote from John Wanamaker, 50% of my advertising works, I just don't know which 50%. And even in the era of digital marketing and performance marketing and all these metrics, marketing is a deeply uncertain activity. And it's uncertain due to execution error, but it's also uncertain because you're dealing with platforms like Facebook and TikTok and Google that constantly change the rules. And you're also dealing with a world that's constantly changing. It might go into, there are 2 wars that are happening right now. There's inflation. There's, the potential of a recession. There's a hugely uncertain presidential election in the United States. There's all of these other factors that are outside of the control of any marketing agency that could have massive material impact on your ability to stay in business and close sales. And so for all of these reasons, if you demand a marketing partner of yours for pay for performance, there's a very narrow set of use cases where that would even be an acceptable situation. But most marketing agencies, and especially ones that are focused on organic SEO content, will never enter an arrangement like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think from the perspective of a business owner that runs a marketing services firm, you nailed some of the analogy I tend to use is it's sort of like a similar analogy, maybe hiring a head coach for a football team. You can offer to pay that coach only for wins, but if you want to pay the coach for wins, they're going to want to make sure they can redo your entire roster, fire your entire ownership, and change, for them to be comfortable that they can come in and make a win. There's a lot of things that are outside of their control. And the 2 big ones is, one, from a marketing standpoint, I don't control someone's product market fit, their pricing. They may have a product that is unproven or doesn't resonate with their customers, especially a smaller business, before that's proven. And more importantly, it's a competitive environment. So if you're trying to compete with Walmart on organic search, you will probably lose over time. And it's not just an extreme scenario like that, but more often than not, there's just volatility with local competitors or someone else who's investing 10,000 instead of 5,000 in SEO that's producing twice the content, optimizing at twice the scale. And so I think from my standpoint, I've actually been in performance contracts before as an agency. We ended up getting out of them very quickly because we were so successful that we drained so much cash from the successful businesses that they said, oh, we loved the idea of performance when it was de-risking for us, but now that you're successful, now we hate that you're taking all this upside. So I think the ambiguity around results and the fact that it's a competitive environment makes it really hard for any competent individual to want to assume all of the risk of your business's success, um, given the amount of work and effort that needs to happen. Now, I think I have seen some models where, depending on what agencies you're working on, they may be willing to meet you in the middle. Looks like some, let's budget some fixed amount for some of this initial effort, and if we hit certain milestones, we'll have a bonus program or some incentive program, and those models tend to work a little bit better. But I think the other thing that I would just be realistic with this team about is, if you can't afford to invest in SEO, you can't afford to invest in SEO. I mean, there is just some reality here of like, if you want to compete with people that are investing in a certain marketing strategy, you have to be prepared to invest in that marketing strategy. And if you can't invest in that marketing strategy, you might want to look at some other creative options for getting your initial set of customers until you have the cash flow to support those types of competitive investments.
Love it. Thank you, Jeff, for giving me an opportunity. First of all, thank you, Laura, for the question, because it is so frustrating to business owners to have to pay all this money for marketing and the uncertainty associated with it. And I think Jeff's last answer is the best answer. It's just sometimes you're just not ready for SEO content. Like, if you're sub $1 million, probably the answer is not yet. It's going to be part of a longer range investment. And unless you have the money to spend $5,000 on an investment that's uncertain and won't really pay off for at least a year, and that's all in a best case scenario with a great partner like Saltbox, then just don't do it. Don't do it. Do it yourself a little bit while you're kind of building up towards it, and then recognize that this is just for the next phase in your company's growth.
Yeah. And I empathize with that. I mean, when I started Saltbox, it was like I was up at night on weekends, like trying to write some blogs just to keep that engine moving, because I also couldn't afford to invest into it until we got to about $1.5 million of revenue. So I feel the pain. And I think also lesson 4 we'll get into, because I think this is really important, which is, if you're going to make these investments, you don't have to close your eyes and wait 12 months. There are leading indicators of success that you can use as a business owner to make sure the program is on track. And in Unit 4, we're going to deep dive into all that stuff to make sure that if you are going to go out on a limb, you're making a risk, you're taking a risk, you're making this investment, you at least know how to monitor these leading signals to get a sense of whether this is investment you want to continue making. So you don't need to just write a check and close your eyes, I promise.
So
awesome.
We need to now define who your target audience is when you're creating your content strategy. This is absolutely essential. And the key concept here is, when you try to appeal to everyone, you end up appealing to no one. And I could see Jeff earlier was nodding when I said your target is your ideal customer. So I'll hand it over to you, Jeff, to kind of dig into, who are we targeting with this content?
Yeah, and I think we also had a question earlier in terms of the difference between an ideal customer and what might be your current customer. So I think I want to back up a little bit and just say, when we're talking about our ideal target audience, we're really just looking at that through a very selfish lens. If we could have the perfect customer where it's the best experience for us, it's a great fit for the thing we sell, and we make money when they are here and they're fun to work with and they're good for my business. If you can think of one of your customers that's in that category, you like love working with them, you make money, and you kind of question, why am I helping all of these other customers who are driving me crazy? That's your ideal customer. You're making money, you're happy, it feels aligned with your mission, your values, and it's a great product fit. So that's who we're really trying to define when we think about our ideal customer personas. And in reality, you probably have more than one as well. Even if you sell something universal. I had a friend that ran a hot dog stand in Orlando when I was growing up, and he used to joke, he said, everyone's my customer. I said, I don't think that's true, because I have to be in Orlando, right? And he goes, well, yeah, it's everybody who's in Orlando. And I'm like, but I have to be in Orlando at lunchtime, right? And he's like, well, yeah. And I was like, and I have to be able to afford your hot dog. And he's like, well, yes. And so it's like, so no, really, we're talking about commuters who work in Orlando at a certain income level, who can afford to buy lunch instead of making their lunch at home, and they work outside of their home and happen to be in the area during that time. So even if you think you can sell to everybody, really getting definition around this is important, because when you translate this to the effort we're going to make into content production or sales, you want to make sure that you're messaging to that person. And what you tend to find is that your messaging is a fit for some of those people, not a fit for other people. So if you're going to pick the person it's a fit for, pick the perfect customer and then opportunistically sell the rest of the customers who will probably find some value along the way. So we can go to the next slide, Dan. So in terms of how do we define either a buying persona or an audience persona, there are a ton of frameworks for this. In fact, language tools like Gemini or ChatGPT are actually fun platforms if you want to go deeper into the types of systems there are for defining audience personas. Just ask ChatGPT or Gemini. You can learn a lot about all of these different frameworks businesses use to define them. When we think about this at Saltbox, usually we're focused on trying to identify 4 things about a target customer or a target audience persona. One is we want to know the basics about demographics. Do we know about gender, location, occupation, the information that would help us contextualize who this person is? Then we also want to know things about their belief systems, consumption habits, how they define, how they make decisions, and what's important to them when they're buying. And so we try to establish at least some basic understanding of those psychographics, those consumption habits, those decision criterias. And what's really interesting about this is last unit, we did our keyword research. And so the keyword research actually does tell us a little bit about some of the psychographics and behavioral habits because we understand at least the intent of the audience and what they're looking for. But in this exercise, we're trying to round this out and just get a better picture of who this is. And what I always recommend for companies is that they have at least one buying or audience persona, sometimes 2 or 3. I probably wouldn't have more than 4. If you've got 4 audience personas, you're kind of getting back into the territory of trying to market to a lot of different people. But the other thing I recommend is that you name these people, get a picture, generate it if with Google when they'll let you again, or a tool like Midjourney, or take a picture of one of your real customers, name them. And this is a tool that then can be used by you or any of your marketers when you're creating content to just remember who you're speaking to. And so in the next slide, Dan, I've got an example here of a target persona. This is Isabella Garcia. She's a 27-year-old female, lives in Miami, works in marketing, makes about $65,000 a year. This is an example of if I were running a gym, for instance, in Miami, this might be one of my target personas, someone that lives an active lifestyle. They value some of the socially engaging things like group fitness classes. And so anytime I'm making content, I think about Isabella and I think, what does Isabella need to hear from me based on what she searched for and the kind of things I know about her, the things that are important to her, the kind of things she likes to read and engage with, and a little information about her lifestyle. As an SEO marketer, this is not my primary domain of expertise as well. And Dan and I talked about this a little bit before this course. From a SEO standpoint, we're going to talk about in a bit how heavily we lean on the intent signals of the search query to really drive a lot of our messaging. But even if you're just writing a specific piece of content to answer a certain question, for instance, from a search term, you still need to know who you're speaking to, because all of those qualitative things you'll do to engage the user and make sure that the content doesn't just rank in Google, but ranks in Google and says the right thing to your audience, it means that you have to know who you're speaking to, regardless of whether you're writing your homepage, a press release, or just a small 400-word blog on your website.
You know, it's funny. If you don't know who your audience is, you're right. Your audience is yourself. And you're not doing marketing, you're doing another M word, which has no business value.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's also interesting about that persona we just saw is this was entirely AI produced with one prompt. And so I'm actually going to show you guys, because this is an area of weakness for me as a marketer. I'm much more of a technical, analytical person. I'll show you guys some of the tools I used, and as well as how I used Gemini to actually give me this entire profile.
And so I think that brings us to SparkToro. SparkToro is one of the very cool tools. And Jeff, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, great. Well, I've worked with this group long enough to know what my first question is going to be even before I get started. So let me pull up SparkToro's pricing page as a starting point. So good news, I try really hard to use free tools when I can, and SparkToro is free up to a certain amount of utilization. So the plan I'm using today is going to be their personal plan. I think I pay something like $50 a month for this as part of our agency. But I do want you to know you can use this tool for free. It might limit some of the results you can get. I think it limits how many times you can use it, like something like 20 times a month you can use the tool. But you can check this out for free. So if you want to go to sparktoro.com on your own and follow along with us, feel free to do so. Um, what SparkToro is this is actually created by the same company. If anybody has heard of a company called SEO Moz or Moz or the event MozCon that happens, the ex-founder of that company, Rand Fishkin, after he left Moz, created SparkToro. And what SparkToro does is it's essentially a large database where they scrape tons of websites, social media profiles. They use their AI tools to augment some of the information about what people have in their profiles, what kind of content they're engaging with, and a lot of just really juicy stuff that can help you understand not only how your target customers might be behaving, but also the other content they engage with or certain social media profiles that they might use or follow on Twitter or Instagram that you can use to get ideas for the kind of content that may resonate. So I'll stick with the example we've been using that I operate a gym in Miami. One way I can use this tool is try to look for people who frequently talk about fitness somewhere in their social media behavior. And what this tool will do is allow me to say, hey, just find me a bunch of information on the people active on social media that are talking about some kind of fitness and give me insights into things like their demographics, the kind of social media profiles they follow, the type of hashtags that they follow or engage with. And when you start going through this exercise, you learn a little bit about, you might get some keyword data back for your keyword research, but you also understand the trending hashtags that might be relevant topics for you to be including in your content strategy. You can also see, this is where I think it's really powerful for the kind of work we do, is we can see who's doing well today. So the people who do talk about fitness in their profiles, what social media accounts are they engaging with? And by seeing this, we can go find certain profiles like health or the workout magazine that we can go then analyze their content and understand what kind of stuff are they talking about since they get such good engagement from this audience. And then beyond some of the information about things like podcasts they listen to or YouTube channels they describe to, you can also get some of the basic demographic data. So we can see that, it's a pretty split audience gender wise of people engaged with fitness, mainly people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that are doing that. And we get a lot of juicy information to help flesh out some of those audience profiles and inform our content strategy. So I really love this tool. And in terms of where I use it in the process, usually we've already started creating drafts of an audience persona that we want to target. And we use a tool like this to get more specific. So for instance, in the example I gave, I think we knew our target persona, Isabella, spends time on social media. That's a great generic statement, but we want to take that a level further. So by using a tool like this, we can also estimate that they engage with certain social media profiles or there's certain hashtags that they tend to engage with. And it allows us to position our personas in a much more specific way. So when we're making our content, we can make sure we're speaking to all of those elements that we know our audience engages with already. So I would definitely take this, even though you may only have 2 or 3 free queries that you can use. I would strongly recommend putting some topics that are relevant to your business. Maybe you can start with some of the keyword data we did in our last exercise, and you can start seeing the kind of social media profiles that are getting a lot of engagement with this audience. And by then going and analyzing and looking at some of those profiles, you'll get a lot of great content ideas for what resonates with your target market. Awesome. Well, and then
move on to the next one.
Yeah, let's share. And if you want, Dan, I can just keep sharing my screen because we're gonna hop over to
Let me
Gemini.
I want to just do a quick intro.
Perfect.
And I actually realized that I kind of muffed the first one, so I'm going to do that one over and then go right into the next one. So, because there was another screen I was supposed to share. So next up is we're going to do a quick demo of SparkToro, and SparkToro is an incredible audience research tool. And you use SparkToro when you want to understand more about your target audience based on the keywords we're trying to rank for. We're going to do another demo with another AI tool, Gemini, which is the chatbot that is created by Google. And this one is specifically about creating audience personas. Google Gemini, gemini.google.com. And this is a really good prompt template that you can use. And Jeff's now going to show you what kind of results it'll get for you.
Great. Thanks, Dan. So one thing while I'm getting this pulled up that I will encourage all of you guys to explore with, and knowing this group and seeing the survey results, I'm fairly certain that that you guys are probably already doing this. But the prompt templates that I'll be providing today are, I would call them starter templates. What I've experienced as a marketer is that even the same prompts I use over time have different responses from these tools as they change the way the tools are changed and tweak the way their outputs work or update their training data. You can start to get some different responses. So the prompts I've shared with you guys today, I would consider them starter prompts. And what I would encourage you is if you ever are using these tools and doing this prompting and you're not getting quite what you want, don't hesitate to sit there and do some different iterations or tweak the prompt a little bit in a way to try to get a better outcome. Because what I would share with you guys from personal experience, and you probably have seen this too, is sometimes the same prompt, a week apart from each other will actually produce very different results depending on how much the tools are changing. So just be prepared that you may want to massage this. But the prompt that I'm going to be using today is a very simple one. So essentially what we'll be doing is telling Gemini that we want their help creating an audience persona. And in addition to just telling them that we want that generically, in this example, we are specific with the kind of elements of an audience persona we care about: demographics, psychographics, decision criteria, consumption habits. And we're also being explicit about asking Gemini to provide that to us in a clear way for a specific type of business. So what the way to use this prompt is to just create a business description that's very basic about what your company is, maybe a high level of where you're located, what you sell, who you sell to. I have a really brief example for my very fake gym in Miami that I will hopefully one day open after having so many examples with this. But I'll just say my business is a gym that has strength training, cardio equipment, personal training, and group fitness classes. And what Gemini will do for me is essentially create a persona that they believe is a good fit target audience based on what my business is. And what I really love about doing this as a marketer is this data itself might not be 100% accurate or relevant for my company. In fact, even the language model itself tells us, hey, just FYI, this is general. You may want to consider customizing this or creating additional segments or putting more specific information or conducting market research. So the way I like to use this is, one, if I'm just getting started, this is the fastest way to take me from not knowing anything to at least having a reasonable thesis of a potential target customer I could use for my business. But the second thing I love about it is it also gives you a good framework and a template that you can use to then take this and make it more specific. So oftentimes in our workflow, what we'll do is we'll use a tool like Gemini or ChatGPT, which you can do a very similar thing with, to get these initial profiles built out. And then we'll take a copy of this and go use a tool like SparkToro or go into the gym and talk to some of our customers to make them more specific or get more feedback. But what I love about AI is with a click of a button, we can go from nothing to at least a solid template and starting point that we can then build off of. And it helps us just move a lot faster through some of those initial mental roadblocks you might have when you're trying to start documenting these things in your company.
I love that. Yeah. This is Gemini. Oh, you know what? I bet you when Gemini turns back on image generation, they'll probably even include a photo.
It's possible Isabella's photo came from Gemini last week as well, before they shut it down.
This is February 2024, and you go ahead and ask them to create an image. I just want to see what they say. What I saw them says, we don't know how to create an image, which let's see what happens.
Oh, they're still learning this time.
Yeah, before they said, I don't know how to. Now it's saying I'm still learning how to. But, in weeks or months from now, that will change. And you would be able to get then an image of Isabella as well.
Yeah.
Did they name the persona?
In this example, they did not. So this
Why
is
don't
an
we ask
example.
for a name?
Yeah. So let's give it a name because this is just like I was talking to at the beginning of this. It gave me a name the first time. Can you give a name to my persona?
And let's see if it's woke.
Oh, they're giving me some
Adriana,
options. And
Isabel,
I
Carla,
actually think
Miguel.
this might take us a little bit on a rabbit hole, but I, as an engineer who loves this AI stuff, I actually think this is the domain problem that has to be solved for these tools to work well, which is there's there needs to be some acknowledgement that there is bias in the data and in the systems, and there are preferences that the user has that they may want to personalize. Like certain users may want to skew towards certain imagery or certain language or certain belief systems. And I think what we're going to see over time is that these tools are customized to you as a user. So maybe for me, they generate certain names that are consistent with the content I tend to engage with online. Whereas for Dan, they personalize it for the kind of content he engages with. Because right now they are trying to do what we're talking about not doing, which is having the right information for every person in the world, which leads them to do things like this, give us tons of names that are, um, frankly, pretty cool. Actually, Adriana
Yeah.
Active and Isabel Energized.
Isabel Energized. I think that's my favorite. You know, what's interesting though is they do make a point. It combines a common Miami name,
Yeah,
and then the third name in both lists are not as common to Miami, but they're a little bit more neutral. So I actually love this answer because I do think it reflects the fact that 2/3 of Miami-Dade County is foreign born, and most of those folks are from Latin America or the Caribbean. All
yeah.
right, so let's move on. I'm gonna share my screen here. So next up is crafting a compelling message. Now you have defined your ideal target customer. You have leveraged some different tools to put some definition around that persona. And now you need to figure out how to speak to them. And in this case, when you're dealing with SEO content, search intent is king. So what the heck is search intent, Jeff?
Yeah.
And how does that drive a content strategy?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, this is very important. And this is where SEO can probably diverge the most from traditional marketing. If you're running a newspaper ad, you wouldn't even really worry about any of this stuff. But with search engine optimization, we talk a lot about search intent. What search intent means is what is the user looking to either accomplish or receive when they type in a search query. So for instance, if someone searches for urgent care near me, if you show them a blog about like the if you think about what that user needs, that user is probably having a minor medical emergency or is looking for fast medical care. And when someone types in a query like that, they're often in need of short-term immediate care. um, if you think that you're going to do really well for that query because you're writing a large educational blog on the difference between an urgent care and a hospital, you're missing the intent of the search query. Someone who's searching for, urgent care close to my house probably needs to hear more about, are you in urgent care? Where are you located? What's the pricing? Can they come in today? Because their intent is to solve some type of medical emergency that they have. Their intent is not to research about the concepts of urgent cares and the benefits in general of an urgent care versus a hospital. So search intent really starts to trump a lot of these things when we get into SEO, especially the more specific a query is. If someone's searching for something like dog food, that's not very specific. So we don't really know what they want. And then our personas become more important with how we craft our messaging. But if someone is searching for, can my 2-month old German Shepherd puppy eat raw chicken? That's such a specific query that we almost don't care about your persona anymore. I don't really care who you are, what you do for a living, where you live. I'm very clear that your intent is to figure out if your young German Shepherd can eat raw chicken or not. So my content should be very specific about what you need to evaluate there. And that's why when we get into SEO, we always recommend you still have these personas because they will craft that narrative. But the more specific your search query targets are, the more intent becomes the main thing you should really care about.
Yeah, and my favorite example of this is tire repair shop near me.
Yep. Yeah.
Like it's dead clear what your situation is and what you need. And one of the things, I was listening to an interview recently with the head of search at Google. They are super hyper focused on search intent because a lot of times it's very ambiguous and they have to guess. And they even start to study your own preferences and habits and define your intent based on your past search history and your behaviors. So they're like the best in the world and better, way better than anyone else at kind of knowing what you mean, even if you didn't write it. And so much of Google's search results and so much of the competitive advantage that Google has is that they've done better than almost anyone at figuring out what you're really asking for, sometimes despite the misspelled mess that you wrote in the search bar.
Yeah. And they use a lot of information too. So even something like a tire shop near me could have a different level of urgency if you're on a mobile device or if you're on a desktop. Because if you're on a desktop, you made it to work or you made it home and you're trying to figure out where to take the car tomorrow. Whereas on your mobile device, you're more likely stranded on the side of the road. So a lot of cool behavioral signals in their data. Um, Now so when we're thinking about getting content from our SEO, it is important to make sure that you've got your target keyword list, that you spend some time making sure you understand the intent behind that query. Because sometimes you'll be trying to target queries that have really confusing levels of intent. Like this is a trivial example of someone searching for best things in life. I'm not really clear if this user wants gift ideas for their partner, or maybe they're just seeking inspiration in general in their life, or they're planning an activity, they're having a philosophical crisis of identity, they're looking up lyrics to a song. We're not quite clear. And so, one of the best tricks I recommend for folks is if you've got a search target query already that you're trying to prioritize, and you can look at the next slide, Dan, is take some time to Google it. Because, like Dan mentioned, Google is exceptionally good at understanding users' intent. And so if you take a term, you're not quite sure what a user means with the term, my first recommendation is plug it into Google. And what you'll see in this result is Google is also confused. They're not quite sure whether I'm looking for the lyrics to a song by the Dreamliners that I've never heard of. If anybody loves it, shout out in the comments. And then they also think that the main thing that people are looking for is some kind of inspiration or philosophical conversation about what is important in life. So if I were planning content for these terms, after looking at this, I would probably be looking more at that type of search intent as opposed to someone looking for the top 10 tech products to buy or some other interesting element that I might have interpreted as being the intent behind this query. So that would be my first recommendation, is when you have your keywords, make sure to go Google them and get an understanding of what that user is really looking for based on what those results look like.
So we're going to keep going, but I just wanted to let you guys know that I launched the end of course poll. We're going to keep going for another 10 or so minutes to wrap up the lesson. But if you do need to go at the top of the hour, please do let us know how we did today, and whether you would recommend us to a colleague.
Thanks, all. Okay, so we're gonna get very tactical here, and I think this is probably one of the most important things that you could potentially use AI for, and also where I see a lot of companies struggling. So we talked about in our last lesson picking keywords. So first, let's just make sure we review that at a high level, how we're prioritizing keywords. The first thing is we want to make sure those terms are relevant. So we talked about how we can use SEMrush to analyze competitors. We can use other tools. We can even reverse engineer Google or look at Answer the Public to try to get an understanding of what is everybody searching for, and make sure that you are prioritizing terms that are relevant to your company, where you have something meaningful to say about it. The second thing that's important to us is that the keywords are winnable. So we looked at metrics like difficulty score in SEMrush or other tools. we want to try to avoid these prohibitively competitive terms. One quick way to tell is if you're using a tool like that and it's 100 out of 100 competition, it's probably not the best place to go fishing. The other thing to do is look at the results. If they're all really big websites like Walmart, or you're going up against the US government website, those are probably sites that are going to be too authoritative for you to dethrone. So make sure you pick things that are winnable. And then finally, you want to make sure that whatever you're prioritizing actually has search volume. Like we talked about in our first unit, I wouldn't get too hung up about search volume. If you're finding a query, either it's returning from Google's autocomplete results, or you see it in SEMrush, or it shows up in Answer the Public, if it exists in any of those systems, it means that more than 0 people have searched for it. Otherwise, it wouldn't even end up at all in any of the systems you're looking at. So if you have any indication someone's from searching for it, it could be relevant to you. But generally speaking, if you're going to make these efforts, you'd like to see maybe 100+ people a month that are going to be searching for these things, so that if you are successful, you actually see and feel some volume of that in your company. So this is the hardest thing people usually stumble on at this stage is, okay, we have this big keyword list, and we know eventually we need to have all this awesome web content, but how do we go from this kind of disorganized giant list of keywords that we picked, and we have maybe 100 keywords on a list that we could be relevant to our business? How do we actually go from that to being able to operationalize the production of SEO optimized web content?
And the answer is a content calendar.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there has to be a better way. This can seem so basic, but it's such critical blocking and tackling, which is this idea that from your target keyword list, don't just stop there. Your target keyword list is a helpful reference document for everyone to use in the company when you're producing any content, but you should also be deliberate about taking that keyword list and planning out content that allows you to produce good content for your persona, that provides the right context for the user's search intent and gives you the right coverage on your search keywords. And traditionally, the way that marketers do this, it has been manually reviewing a giant list of target keywords and having to actually be creative enough to group those into relevantly tight thematic categories, and then brainstorm headline ideas and brainstorm different topical ideas, and really just painstakingly work down a giant spreadsheet to get a content calendar for your company. For me, who is more of a technical and analytical marketer, this has been my favorite way to use some of these AI tools. They are just really awesome for helping you go from that keyword data to some really good ideas for your content calendar. So today, what we're going to do, and you can go to the next slide, Dan, we've got a content calendar template that we'll make sure is available to you guys as a resource after this course. But at minimal, I want to at least introduce you to the things we care about. We want to make sure when we're planning out a content calendar that we know the titles of the content we're creating, focus keywords, those are coming from our keyword list. We'd like to go ahead and create a meta description, which is an element we'll talk more about next week when we talk about producing great content, but a brief description that's going to show up and help optimize for search engines of the content, as well as any notes for the copywriter of what type of recommendations we have. Like if we want to cover certain elements of a piece of content, or if there's an outline that's important to reinforce these things. And what we do at our company is we do this keyword research. And once we're done with the keyword research, we make sure to plan a backlog of usually about 10 or 12 pieces of content. And we try every month to make sure we always have 10 weeks to 12 weeks worth of content planned out, so that when we're doing the content production, we don't have to do a lot of thinking. We're just ready to sit down. We know our target keywords. We know what we're writing about. We have some context for those things. And AI is a great tool from going from keywords to content. I'm really excited to show you how you can use Gemini to do that.
So I wanted to just take a second and pause on the importance of this content calendar. This is the nut of today. This is the secret that you've been waiting for. This is the best practice that takes a good keyword strategy, and it's the in-between step that everybody skips before they get into content creation. So most of us are aware that we need to have a keyword strategy, but very few of us create a really good content calendar that strategically puts it into action. And so this is a really important mid step between defining your keywords that you think are winnable and profitable, and then actually going churning out the content, which is what we're going to do in the next unit. And so now that we've shared with you the magic bullet, right? We've shared with you the secret to the kingdom of SEO content strategy. Now we want to show you how easy it's become. Like, this used to be a nightmare, a nightmare. This is a days-long process, something you could never find the time to do. Now we have the ability to leverage AI to do it much faster, and oftentimes much better than we might have been able to do it on our own. And so Jeff is going to show you how to do that. And Jeff will also talk to you about what are the guardrails. Like, nothing that AI generates on its own is going to be quite there, but we can get you 80% of the way there much faster and in much less painful way. So Jeff, please indicate, like, what are the weaknesses of an AI generated calendar, and where, you know, when you're investing your precious time in taking that calendar and getting it to the 100%, where to focus on, where does AI tend to have failure point?
Of course, we can cover that.
So this is gemini.google.com, and there again is the prompt template that Jeff is going to now demo.
Thanks, Dan. And for me, this is where AI has been a godsend, because I have been, you know, I'm a technical marketer by trade. When I get into this realm of, you know, I know how to pick my keyword targets. I know how to technically optimize a piece of content. When I get into content planning, I just tend to get hung up creatively. And this is such a great way to use these tools. So what we're going to do, and this prompt is shared in the video, is first we're just going to do a prompt to prepare Gemini for what we are about to do. So our first prompt is entirely generic. We're essentially just telling Gemini that we would like to create a content calendar that's going to be used for our blogs or a resource center, and we want it to show up in a table. We want to make sure it includes all of these basic elements from our SEO content calendar. And then we're telling it that we would provide them a list of keywords later. So the reason we're doing this is we talked a little bit about single shot prompting before, but these language models tend to work better if you tell it what you're about to do before you're doing it. So since we want to share with Gemini probably hundreds of keywords for them to do this exercise with, we want to make sure before we prompt it to do that all at once that we just let it know, hey, we're about to do this, and I submit that as a prompt. And usually these tools, whether you're using Gemini or ChatGPT, they'll say, okay, I understand what you're asking me. I'm now prepared. Why don't you provide me with a list of keywords? So if I were doing, I had been doing a keyword research for a veterinary clinic that we work with. And if I had a list of keywords, normally what I would be doing without AI is staring at this list, probably rearranging them and try to brainstorm articles I could write that cover a lot of these things. And it's a pain in the butt. And it takes a really special kind of creative talent to do that well and at scale. But with this prompt, we can just take a keyword list like this and dump it into Gemini. And now Gemini will do the work for me of looking through those 100 keywords. And given the framework that we already prompted to do, it's now producing a list of potential page titles, the focus keywords. And what you'll see here is it's pulled from all of these keywords and helped us group them into relevant categories that are relevant to a specific topic. And then also provides a meta description we can use on the page, as well as even specific recommendations for the style of content. So for instance, this first article, it's saying, why don't we have an article on dog breathing problems and make sure that we cover some of the warning signs, some of the treatment options, home care tips. And it's really a awesome outline that if one of my US based masters in linguistics copywriters on our team sent me this, I would be like, great job. It looks good. It looks very solid. So in terms of where this doesn't work, we'll get into in a little bit. But the thing that I also like about Gemini in particular is Gemini, since it's integrated with the Google suite, is you can just export this to a spreadsheet. So even if you're just trying to use this for ideas and moving fast, it's fairly easy to take this and now have it in a spreadsheet that you can share with your team, that you can make edits in, anything you want to accomplish. You've got all of this right here and easy to work with. And so for me, this is essentially that button we just clicked would have taken me probably maybe an hour and a half to get from that giant list to something as solid as this in terms of the plans that we have. So let's spend a moment and talk about where this isn't as useful or what you might need to do to make sure we keep the AI on the rails, so to speak. The first thing I would say is when you're trying to target your SEO content, ideally we don't want to just make duplicate content that's the exact same as something that might rank number one, number two, or number three already. So one thing I like to do always after I do this is query one of these keywords. And I like to check what articles are ranking just to see and make sure that whatever my recommended title is here, that it's going to stand out. So, okay, dog breathing problems, we explore difficulty or label breathing. What I'm checking for is I don't think I actually want my title to look nearly the exact same as one of these top three rankings. So I might then go back to Gemini and ask it to brainstorm a few other titles for this first article that I could pull from. So that's the first thing I would do is just check to make sure that Google these terms, make sure that the titles that are being recommended aren't totally ripped off from the top three results and that you've got something unique to say. The other thing that this doesn't do that we would do to take it a step further that is a little more advanced, and we can talk some about it next week, is that this gives us a good list of articles for our blog, but it doesn't necessarily give us the right tools if we want to optimize our homepage or our service page for certain keyword targets, which is really a slightly different exercise than when we're producing new content. So I think this is a great, if you don't have a lot of resources and you've got a target list, this is a great way to just get a plan that's easy to go heads down and execute against. But I would double check and maybe brainstorm a few different page titles. And I would also not necessarily use this as my strategy for optimizing my homepage or my service or pricing pages. But this is perfect for my blog. And yeah, so Gemini actually can help with, thank you. Sorry, I'm far away from my computer. I think that was Natalia had asked about hashtags. So, but Gemini does, these language models do a fairly decent job of social content hashtags as well. So one thing that you guys could do in your homework as you're playing with these things is you can go far beyond this basic template that I created. Like this is a very base, this is the minimum viable stuff we needed to. But if you wanted to, these tools are pretty good at things like social media hashtags. So for instance, I could ask it, and let's just try to do it live. Can you also add a column for relevant hashtags I could use when promoting this content on social media? Let's make it do even more work. Maybe even a sample tweet. Just we'll see how it does. So if you want to really go overkill, you don't need to stay on this basic template. This is the minimum viable thing you need to do to make sure that you're producing content and putting one foot in front of the other. But these tools are fairly good at helping round out more content. So in this example, it looks like it's given us the same original content, but then it's added. Oh, let me see if I can scroll. It's added on the far right some hashtag examples as well as a quick little tweet draft for you to use if you're promoting this content on social media. Yeah, so Michelle's asking some great questions related to heading tags. So H1 tags and H2 tags. Can we get this in the content plan? What we do at Saltbox is we usually try to outline our main H1 tags, which is often the same as the page title in many instances, particularly if your website is set up where a heading, that H1 tag is usually the title of the article at the top of the page. We're going to spend some time next week when we go into actually optimizing a piece of content using language models a lot deeper into heading tags. So I would say for the content plan, I think it's okay to stay at a title level. But when we actually go to use AI to produce content, we are definitely going to deep dive into H1s and H2s and all that fun outline structure stuff.
Yeah, so a content strategy or a content calendar, I should say, which is the core of the strategy, is not going into what the blog specifically says, both on the page and in the meta text, which is the text that Google uses to index it. So it's really kind of a little bit of a higher level of abstraction than
Yeah.
that.
And what we're trying to avoid is you don't want to be in a position where you just have a target keyword list, because what happens when you do that is maybe there's someone on your team that said they'd be willing to write a blog this week to support the company's SEO goals, and they go to write the blog and you hand them a list of 100 keywords. They're going to be like, what in the world? What do I do with this? Now they have to sit there and every time they go write a piece of content, do a lot of thinking. So really the utility of this content calendar it allows you to eliminate that question with your copywriter. So by the time somebody is producing a piece of content, they don't have to do keyword research. They know the target keywords. They don't have to dig through a giant spreadsheet. They don't even really need to think about the topic or what they're trying to position the content for. They can really just focus on, okay, given this is what we're trying to do, how do I make an awesome piece of content? Which just speeds up that cycle and creates a lot of efficiency in this process.
Let me ask you one other quick thing before we move on. Getting the right headline
Mhm.
is tremendously important. And it is the foundation, I imagine, of both talking to bots and talking to humans. And it is a part of the content calendar. Can you just talk a little bit about optimizing a headline?
Yes, it's it's exceptionally important for three different reasons that I'm aware of, technically speaking. One, humans. Humans usually only read headlines. So, certainly from a traditional marketing standpoint, uh, getting your headline right can be the difference in me reading the first paragraph or me not reading anything at all. So, there's certainly one objective with headlines is that they are not necessarily clickbaity, but reflective of something that's going to make me want to read it. The second reason why headlines important is when Google is looking for keyword relevance or topical relevance, they often look at those headlines to essentially represent an outline of what the content is about. So your headlines can be an opportunity to reinforce your keyword targets. And then the third reason it's super important is when you're using AI to generate content, the way that these language models are built is at a fundamental basic level, they're essentially word predictors. So if you give them 10 words, they predict the 11th word. You give them 20 words, they predict the 21st word. And so the content of the first thing that's written, your title, your opening paragraph, when you use an AI tool to build out the rest of the content, the entire tone, the style, the information that that language model produces is heavily, heavily influenced by that first bit of content it receives, which is often the headline. So that's a lot of design criteria to try to get into one little piece of real estate. Usually, the gut checks that I do is I go, would this get me to click on this article if I saw this as my Google search result when I searched for dog breathing problems? So there's a human element of is this catchy enough and aligned enough with my intent to make me think that I'll get what I want? The second thing we usually look for is trying to make sure we incorporate some of the language that we're trying to rank for in those titles. And then the third thing is we want to make sure whatever tone or style that the title is written in is reflective of the kind of tone and voice we want to use throughout the article, because those AI tools will really latch on to that when producing content. And there are probably 1,000 other really smart things that you should think about when it comes to effective messaging in a title. I'm sure there's a master class that could be dedicated just to that, but I think I would start with those three as a basic tool for that.
Have you ever heard, I was, so why don't we go on and do the, I'm going to take over screen sharing for a sec. And so let's talk about the assignment based off today's lesson. And then if you could actually just run through going through the assignment, that would be great. So this week's assignment for Unit 2 is to build a 4-week content calendar based off a keyword or set of keywords for your target customer, your ideal customer. And one thing I'll say is this was in the past a half-day activity. In my company, we use a thing called Scrum, and we defined creating a 6-month marketing calendar as the definition of something that took 4 hours to do. So it's taking a lot less time these days to do something like this, and we're going to kind of walk you through the building of a content brief in a matter of 4 minutes rather than 4 hours.
Yeah. And this is in the category of like probably could be a TikTok video. So I'll share my screen just to show you like a quick and dirty way I would approach it. It's probably very similar to how we just ran this last demo. So the first thing I would do is I would get a subset of my keyword targets. So assuming you did the assignment last week, you probably have at least one. You might have 5 to 10 keywords that you want to rank for, but I would just get those on a list somewhere. Probably the more the better, though I think you may want to start with at least 10. And I would start with some keywords that are somewhat diverse in terms of topical areas to make sure that I had a good amount of content to work with. So it just as a reminder on that process is I would probably be looking at Google autocomplete and search results. I would be looking at SEMrush data. I might be using Answer the Public to create that initial list. And I just start with 10 to 20 queries that I think are relevant to my business. And then what I would do is I would use a prompt very similar to what we showed here to start and get in my initial list. Once I had that list, I'd probably take it over, put it in a spreadsheet, and then I'd probably go into editing mode. So I'd go through this list and I'd make sure the title reflects the tone I want. I might even go back to Gemini and ask it to give me different versions of titles. I'd check the search results and I'd make any other changes to content that I stylistically want to create. So don't necessarily think that just because the language model tells me to do it doesn't mean I should. There might be scenarios where I have a certain expertise or opinion on a topic. And so I look for areas to also put that into these content recommendations. So if I were doing this exercise today, if I already had my target list of keywords, I would probably be budgeting about 15 minutes to use an AI tool to get 4 or 5 content pieces in 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes just tweaking this and editing it to my satisfaction so that it fits nicely with my business and the story I want to tell.
Awesome. Anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so. I think at this
Uh,
point, everybody's ready to at least plan out a month worth of homework.
yeah, exactly. I wanted to share one other just quick tool demo before we go into closeout for this. I was just kind of pulling this together real quick. So there's another tool that I love to use as a copywriter and that I've used to help develop webinar titles. It's called Headline Studio. I wanted to just quickly call it up. So it's it's coschedule.com headline analyzer. And it's the #1 free headline analyzer, although you do need to sign in to get some free credits to do it. So you can type in your headline here. I went ahead and actually did that already and used the one dog breathing problems, recognizing causes. This was one of the headlines you'll recall that Jeff had suggested through Gemini. And you can see here that it talks about a headline score, and it uses different aspects of it, character count, word count, and it can tell you that this is a little short. The green area would be a little longer. It's a little short in terms of characters, and then even give you opportunities to improve the use of emotional words, increase your use of common words, increase your word count by 4, rephrase your headline as a question list or how-to statement. It then has an SEO score. It did much better on SEO than it did on headline. And that's not surprising, right? Because this was derived from an SEO analysis. So it's showing it as a high quality score from a SEO and keyword perspective. And then this is actually new from the last time that I used it, which is it actually allows you to use AI to actually draft a better headline. And so then it's giving me some options. This is a live demo, which is always danger. Let's try what are ways to improve my headline, and let's see what it says. The current headline is informative but can be improved. And then it's selecting a couple different. So let's do 7 common causes of dog breathing problems. That's 7, 9. This is so it's going to charge me 1 credit. You can see I have 9 out of 10 free credits remaining. Let's go ahead and do that and see what happens. So now the headline score is a 77, which was way higher, and the SEO score is an awesome 91. This is so cool and brand new. The headline AI. So rather than you trying to figure out what the better one is, the AI is going to optimize the headline for you.
That's great.
Any feedback on that, Jeff? That tool?
No, I want to use it.
I taught something to Jeff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get back to wrapping up for today. This was a great session, Jeff. Thank you so much. Thank God your mic was cooperating today. All right. So let's wrap up today's unit. First of all, what did we talk about today? You'll remember that in Unit 1, we talked about developing a keyword strategy, and that these keywords have to be, relevant. People need to be searching for them, and they need to be winnable. But once you have that list of keywords, what do you do next? And we talked about the bottom line is you create a content calendar, and that content calendar is going to then guide and drive the content creation that comes after it. We then showed you a bunch of tools that you can use to take a spreadsheet of winnable keywords and turn those into another spreadsheet that gives you guidance on what are the keywords we're targeting and what is the headline and what's a summary of the content that's going to appear. Once you have that, you're ready to actually start creating content, which is what we're going to focus on in Unit 2. So, Jeff, what were some of the ahas that you had from today's session?
Yeah, well, I think the recent one was probably your demo just now. I think for me as a technical marketer, editorial things have always been challenging to me. Like I'm just not a master of language. I'm not an artist of persuasion. And so what I'm becoming very fond of these AI tools for is not a replacement for the technical thinking or the strategy, but I just think it's so cool how this can round out your skill sets as a marketer, whether you're a technical marketer or more of a messaging focused marketer. These tools really have the ability to give you a lot of superpowers in areas that may be challenging for you normally.
Yeah. I have two big ahas from today. One actually came in preparation, which is I didn't actually know the extent to which Google uses human input to determine search rankings. I had always kind of assumed, and I'm probably not alone, that search rankings were really the product of an algorithm. And it makes me actually really like Google a lot more, because I've always felt a little bit of disdain for technical SEO because I thought it was only algorithmically driven. And, Google's smart and they understand that an algorithm can only get you so far in terms of understanding whether content is good. And they're the signals that we give to show that content is good. The granddaddy of them all is linking from our website to that piece of content, which is the foundation of PageRank and really the initial insight that launched Sergey Brin and Larry Page when they were graduate students at Stanford into creating Google. That idea that the number one indicator of quality is if people link to the content. But I had no idea that there are thousands of people who are spending every day, all day, for $15 an hour, looking at a rubric of whether a piece of content is quality and grading it. And we're going to actually share with you that rubric because it's published in Unit 3, and I cannot wait. And then the second big aha is just how important the content calendar is. And that really sunk in watching this session live today. Like, your strategy is a schedule of content creation. And if you have that and it's based on good keyword research, and then you follow it, you will succeed. That is so powerful. I have long known that a marketing calendar is the most important strategic document for a small business. But I always sort of thought of that more as like, okay, here are when my emails are going to go out. Here's when my social media is going to be put out. Here are the topics that I'm going to cover. We're going to do one blog a week. It'll be on this topic. And I just didn't really fully appreciate how essential it is from an SEO and technical marketing perspective. And I just really am grateful to you for introducing that to me and helping reinforce how important that is. So with that, I'd love to give you, Jeff, the parting thought.
Yeah, our friend Aristotle, the difference between an idea and reality is execution. This is part of why the marketing calendar is so important. It's easy to think about all the great SEO you could be doing for your business. It's hard to do it. And next week in particular, we're gonna get to take a keyword strategy from off, look at our content calendar and actually start producing content. This is where the rubber is gonna hit the road for us. So I'm so excited for next week, and we'll get into some execution now that we've got a great idea and a good plan.
Yeah, if I may offer a tiny edit, last week, you remember the parting thought, he put a red line through it, and the journey of 1,000 steps starts with a keyword. If I may just verbally put a red line through execution and say that Aristotle, and I quote, says the difference between an idea and reality is a content calendar.
There you go.
So next up in Journey of the Keyword is we're now going to use AI to create engaging multimedia content. That's unit 3. And then after that, we're going to use AI to evaluate and optimize that content. Jeff, can't thank you enough. Thank you for sticking around a little longer, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks all.